What's good? It's Woog. Terence Crawford just delivered a spectacular knockout over David Avanesyan in the 6th round. This was a pretty interesting fight. I had a feeling David Avanesyan was going to catch him with a few shots in the early rounds. I mean, David Avanesyan does throw some tricky power punches. They're coming from weird angles sometimes. He keeps sustained pressure on you. Terence Crawford tends to get caught sometimes early in fights, and he will sometimes sacrifice a little bit of defense to set up better offense. This was a little bit interesting. I actually had David Avanesyan winning one of the rounds. I think that I had him winning the 2nd round. And Terence Crawford, he started the fight off orthodox and then, switched pretty early. I think he switched within the 1st round and went to southpaw. But he was keeping his right hand out there, kind of probing and popping, and sometimes David Avanesyan would throw something on top of it and catch Terence Crawford. Avanesyan, I think, even caught Crawford with like a couple uppercuts. Not as many uppercuts as Terence Crawford was catching Avanesyan with. But as the rounds drew on and you got into the 3rd and then the 4th, Terence Crawford started taking more and more control where, the David Avanesyan good moments started becoming fewer and far between, and his lunging into the pocket and throwing meaningful punches started becoming a little bit more sporadic, where in the first couple of rounds he was consistently looking to come in and start delivering some bombs. In fact, there were some exchanges in the first 3 rounds that were a little bit scary because if you're Terence Crawford, you want to kind of dictate the terms of a lot of these exchanges, and you want to be able to feint your way in a position where there's only one guy who makes the right call and is able to throw the punch at that time, land the punch, and be able to stay out of harm's way. In assessing and kind of previewing Crawford versus Avanesyan, I was thinking that somebody the caliber or with the style of Errol Spence would be able to control Avanesyan a little bit more thoroughly round over round, where I don't think Avanesyan would have had this many good moments against Errol Spence. But I also said that once Terence Crawford gets, things more or less figured out and starts anticipating the attack or the entry points, that the knockout is going to be that much more spectacular, because Terence Crawford has just mastered the ability to switch up his punch patterns to where he throws and lands power punches that the opponent just totally doesn't see coming. You see a lot of fighters, they'll do a lot of 1-2s, and just, and they don't just go 1-2 and keep it on the same hand to throw the punch pattern off. You don't want the opponent to be able to recognize the punch pattern because, we just did a Sandor Martin versus Teofimo Lopez recap, and I was talking about how Teofimo Lopez started getting pretty predictable in his punch patterns to where Sandor Martin was able to kind of anticipate and almost like second nature be able to just kind of roll with the 3 to 4 punches that he already kind of knows are coming. Terence Crawford, once he starts getting flowing, he gets much, much more creative. And the finishing sequence was brilliant because David Avanesyan threw a punch, and immediately after David Avanesyan let that punch go, Terence Crawford with his backhand, his left hand, threw a sharp uppercut, followed it up immediately with a right hook, lead right hook to close the show. David Avanesyan did not see those coming, and it's not like Crawford wasn't throwing uppercuts previously in this fight. He threw several uppercuts. I mean, he started looking like just, what is it, like the water torture, where just like one drop. And Terence Crawford is also very good at switching up the speeds of his punches. So you'll see him go like tap, 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 pop, and the pops would be to the body. And he started doing David Avanesyan kind of dirty to the body with that backhand, that left hand. He was basically probing his way into position and kind of, again, mixing up the punch speed and the punch velocity to where David Avanesyan would kind of be like expecting something up top. Terence Crawford would just set it up beautifully to go low, hard to the body, and you could hear the thud of that punch, and you could tell that that was the one that he wanted to land. So those 3 out of the first 4 punches that he would throw would basically just be to set the table, get you to look at this, think about that, then boom, that's the one I really wanted to land. Terence Crawford is a very sophisticated fighter. Again, he is more vulnerable to getting hit cleanly than a lot of the classically great defensive boxers of the past. I wouldn't put Terence Crawford's defense in there with the Pernell Whitakers, the Floyd Mayweathers, and so those guys. Or even like a Sandor Martin. I don't think that he's as defensively slick as Sandor Martin. But boy, when he gets his offense rolling, look, He has not gone the distance yet at welterweight. He has finished all of his opponents. And this highlight reel worthy knockout over David Avanesyan, this is one of the best knockouts, just in terms of like the flashiness and how dramatic it looked of Terence Crawford's career. And this is actually how I predicted this one going down. I thought he was going to get, hit a few times cleanly early. Terence Crawford was. I mean, I have a lot of respect for David Avanesyan. I saw what he did to Josh Kelly. I mean, my favorite fighter of all time was Sugar Shane Mosley. His last fight, his last career fight, was a decision loss against David Avanesyan. So I saw him coming on, and I just knew that he was a high-quality fighter. But his style just lent itself to being caught clean, trying to close the distance on Terence Crawford. And again, I was surprised at how many, I called them 50-50 exchanges, when Terence Crawford obliges and he and the opponent both let like 3 to 5 punches go at the same time. I thought that David Avanesyan did a pretty good job at punching with Terence Crawford, because that's going to be your chance. When Terence Crawford starts throwing 3 to 5 punches at a time, in close quarters, that's going to be your best opportunity to punch with him and to catch him, because the punch speed differential isn't such that David Avanesyan doesn't have a chance at catching Crawford when they're both letting 3 to 5 bullets fly. So I was surprised at how many of those opportunities Avanesyan got. And again, he caught Terence Crawford a few times, but boy, again, by the 3rd, 4th round, Terence Crawford was in control. And in the 5th round, Terence Crawford started letting more and more punches go, and you could just see that he was flowing. And then in the 6th round, he delivered that beautiful, beautiful knockout. And so that just begs the question, of course, what's going to then happen with Terence Crawford and Errol Spence going forward? Like, my hope going into this fight was Terence Crawford doesn't break his hand or get injured, or, let alone lose and just spoil the whole thing. So there was no injury, apparently, at least as far as I know. There wasn't any like clash of heads where Terence Crawford sustains a cut that's going to take a long time to heal. Nothing nasty like that. So he comes out of this one relatively unscathed. I mean, you never really know what injuries a fighter is dealing with, but he seems okay. He's 35 years old. That's always a concern. So it's going to be interesting to see if they go right back to the table. And I'm just hoping that all parties get right back to business and continue negotiating in good faith. I hope that if PBC really wants to make the fight and Terence Crawford and his team really want to make the fight, that they could hopefully pick up where they left off, and whatever needed to be ironed out, whether it was the transparency that Terence Crawford was looking for from the PBC side, whatever had to be taken care of, I just hope that it gets taken care of sooner rather than later, so we could hopefully get a fight day between Errol Spence Jr. and Terence Crawford. I almost feel like it's wishful thinking at this point, and I'm just hoping that none of the sanctioning bodies mandate that Errol Spence fight like Keith Thurman first. I mean, look, if Errol Spence wants to do like a quick, stay busy style fight, like, Gervonta Davis, Hector Garcia is going to be a tough fight, I think, for Gervonta Davis, but Ryan Garcia is about to fight Hesta. But if, like, on short notice, Errol Spence wants to just take a fight just to get some rounds in, okay, but I don't want it to be like, okay, Errol Spence is going to fight Keith Thurman, like, in March or April or something like that, because that just pushes the fight calendar that much further down the road. And then by that time, you might be dealing with a 36-year-old Terence Crawford, which then you can't even assume that the guy is still in his physical prime or in his fight prime. Like, it's very, very rare that fighters in welterweight are still at the top of their game at 36 years old. Like, look at the great welterweights throughout history and look at who they were fighting and where they were in their career when they were 36 years old. But yeah, Terence Crawford did what he had to do, delivered a brilliant knockout. And again, I'm just hoping that they go right back to the table. I just want them to negotiate and to deliver on Errol Spence versus Terence Crawford. Nothing else right now would be satisfactory. If the other, prospects or contenders, from Stanionis to Virgil Ortiz to Boots Ennis, if they want to fight each other, great. That's what I want to see. I want to see one of those fights between 3 or 4 of those, contender level fighters. I want to see them go at it. But nah, business has to be handled between the two, best welterweights of this part of the era. But yeah, let me know your thoughts on Terence Crawford versus David Avanesyan. Did the fight more or less go as you thought that it would go? Do you find Terence Crawford to be more vulnerable, seeing what you just saw in the early rounds between Crawford and Avanesyan? And who are you leaning between Spence and Crawford if they get that fight done? Again, styles make fights, and I thought that Spence would have controlled David Avanesyan a lot more thoroughly, and I thought he would have had a more dominant performance. But I don't think that it would have resulted in the devastating what just happened type of knockout that we got here with Terence Crawford. But yeah, let me know your thoughts in the comments. Like the video, subscribe to the channel if you are into the fight talk. I'm Woog. Thanks for tuning in.